Hello, it's Wednesday, November 8th. Welcome to Citizens Forum. I'd like to start by thanking the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week, 2 weeks. Our guest in the first segment is Terry Dance Benning, and we're going to be talking about one of the most important issues in the province and in Canada, which is proportional representation. I'd like to just say that I wish either the media or the government would do the job of informing people about a few of the various systems. I mean, it's not that difficult to do, but there's very little access to information that people have, which is very unfortunate on such an important issue. So you support proportional representation, as do I. And what's your main beef with first past the post, our current system?
I think essentially it's because it enshrines false majorities. So what we've seen for the last 16 years in BC is the BC Liberal Party has had a minority of the popular vote, but they've had the majority of seats and all the power. And so it's a fundamentally undemocratic system that goes back to the 15th century. And we believe it's time for Canada to modernize its system and join the ranks of 80 Western democracies that are using proportional representation. We're rich enough, we have educated citizens. Surely we can, at this point in our history, have a deeper form, a broader form of democracy.
Yeah, I do think it's a more democratic system because it actually does give citizens a bit more power. And it does give us what we voted for, which is also very important. Exactly. I just took some numbers in the last BC election. I hope I wrote them down. Yes, it took 18,500 voters to elect one Liberal. It took 19,500 voters to elect one NDP. They were almost the same. But it took 110,000 voters to elect one Green. So the people who vote Green are massively underrepresented, and that happens in all of our elections. The bigger parties, their additional votes count for so much more. So it's so difficult for smaller parties, which can represent a break from our very problematic political parties. Exactly. It blocks them out, anything new. Yeah, the numbers again, 18,500, 19,500, and 110,000 for Greens. So you just don't count.
Yeah, exactly.
There's going to be a referendum, and this is very important. There's going to be a referendum. We're going to vote in November of 2018, 1 year from now. And we're going to vote on something. Do we want PR, and maybe what kind of PR system do we want? So what's happening?
What's happening? Well, first, Fair Vote Canada is delighted that our government and the NDP and the Greens have actively campaigned for proportional representation during the election, and they now have promised to lead the campaign, and they've brought in the enabling legislation, so we're delighted about that. And I think the key is that they've promised to lead, because that's what was missing in the 2009 referendum. You had a government that was basically agnostic, if not opposed. This time, we are looking to and counting on the NDP with support from the Greens to lead this. So that's great. I think, and we're delighted that it's 50% plus one, not a supermajority of 60%. The only thing that we would like to see is the opportunity. It's a mail-in ballot, and we'd like to see some some polling stations for youth, because they don't even know what Canada Post stands for anymore. I mean, how many people have stamps that are age 18? So we think it will be really important on the college and university campuses to have polling stations and enable the youth to vote. And also we want to make sure the government respects and acts on whatever the voter turnout is. That it doesn't turn around and say, oh, 36% voted, that's not enough. And I'm pretty sure they will respect the voter turnout.
Do we have any idea? The actual ballot that we vote on is going to be very, very important. In PEI, Prince Edward Island, about a year ago, voted on this very issue, and a proportional system won. On their ballot, you could choose from 5. including first past the post. And I think that would be a very fair kind of ballot. What do you think?
Yeah, one of the things that we're hoping is that we don't get into all the weeds of the mechanics of voting systems. We feel that was a fundamental factor behind the defeat in 2009. So what we've suggested is the government have like a two-part question. The first being a generic question, basically support in principle for a proportional system that would preserve local representation, but more accurately reflect the popular vote in the composition of the legislature. So ask voters to weigh in on that first.
So you mean the question is, do you want PR or not?
Basically,
Okay.
with the caveat, local representation, popular vote reflected in the composition of the legislature. So that would be the first question.
Okay.
And people may just want to vote on that and that's it. And then the second question could be, if someone's really interested and wants to weigh in on the type
Which
of
one
PR,
do you want?
which one would you like, and rank them. So, that may or may be not how the government proceeds. We know they're going to be consulting probably within the next 2 weeks and asking people to weigh in on what they think the best question or questions should be for the ballot, which I think is great.
Yeah, okay. So that's the process, and hopefully
That's the
we'll hear
process.
more about it. Oh, there's also something else. Do you want to just talk about the part of the legislation that says if the election is held early?
Yeah, as far from my reading of the enabling legislation, the government has said that the earliest opportunity for an election using PR, assuming it's been approved by the electorate, would be July 2021.
Okay. And the election is supposed to be in October
21.
So
right.
if the election is called even 3 or 4 months ahead of when it's supposed to be, if the government falls or something happens, then PR will not be used.
Right. And that's a little problematic.
It's, to me, the most problematic thing is nobody
Yeah.
knows about it. I mean, I only heard because somebody told me.
Yeah.
But it's been allowed by the media and the politicians to pass by completely unnoticed, so the public doesn't even know this kind of poison pill is in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
potentially.
not sure what the government's rationale was for that, but it is an issue.
The Liberals are mounting a campaign very strongly against this,
Yep.
against PR. So they're saying it will hurt rural voters, and I guess they're saying other things as well. What's happening with that?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is that I think the Liberal Party, and I'm talking about the leaders, not Liberal Party voters, because half of Liberal Party voters support moving in the direction of PR, but the leadership has declared that defeating this referendum, defeating PR, is their number one priority. Why? Because as Diane Watts said in a tweet yesterday, that PR could mean the end of the Liberals having a so-called majority government. So for them, I think they're perceiving this as and the outcome being that they'd have to work with other parties as opposed to having all the power. So we see them using this argument about that the rural-urban divide is a tactic,
To divide us.
to divide us and to maintain a rigged system. And on the issue of rural-urban, we don't think there is that divide. I mean, and we have a little postcard here that just shows, I mean, the red section of BC, which is basically the interior
Hold
and
it
the
up
north.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Is that
good.
okay?
Yeah.
The red section, that's represented by Liberal MLAs. They got only 50% of the popular vote, but they got 83% of the seats.
Yeah.
So half the people there didn't vote for the Liberal Party of BC, but their voices are not represented. And you can say the same thing
The NDP
about
areas.
the NDP in Metro Van, where they got 44% of the popular vote and have 65% of the seats. So that's why we are a multi-partisan organization. We believe first past the post isn't in the interests of any of the parties. And that,
Well, it isn't in the interest of the people, the citizens, I don't think.
Exactly.
The parties.
Exactly.
I just like to say my opinion is that the greatest opponent we have is corporate Canada, because they run this country and this province completely. And anything that gives us more democracy is not to be allowed, and PR does that.
But I just want to kind of stress that PR does enshrine local representation. It's an outright lie when the Liberals say that you'll lose your MLAs and seats will be transferred to the cities. It's absolutely false. There are different models of PR where that will be preserved.
Yes.
And it will enable teams of MLAs to work together, which will lead to better decision making.
And it should be the role of the media
Yeah.
to inform people when politicians say things that aren't true. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but the media should not report the lies on any side. They should
Exactly.
they should tell us what is the actual.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to vote in a proportional system? And we actually have a couple of ballots
I know,
here.
you do.
Yeah.
I love that question because, when I first got involved in this movement, I thought, oh, maybe it is very complex. And then I looked at the ballots. And if you can use a cell phone, you can vote under PR. And the citizens of Denmark and Sweden and Germany, 80 countries, Western democracies, are using it. And we're no dumber than the Germans or the Swedish.
Maybe.
And, when you actually look at, do you want to maybe show that one up?
Yeah, so this is a ballot from a German style system, which gives you a local representative, and it also gives you very, very good proportionality. So it gives you local rep and very good proportionality. So if I was going to vote, I won't mark up the ballot, but I would go
Exactly.
and I'm done. That is how,
2 votes.
Yeah,
We
that's
get
how
1
difficult.
vote now for a local MLA. Under that system, mixed member proportional, you get 2 votes. The second one is for your regional rep. I mean, it's simple. And, under a system that we call local PR, it allows you to rank candidates. And again, I'm called all the time by pollsters and marketing companies asking me to set priorities. So it's not a big deal. And if you don't want to rank any and you just want to check off one, that's all you do. And it includes by riding. So there's a local element there so that every local riding would be represented.
Bad news, we've got 2 minutes left.
Ooh.
Should the government fund a yes and no side in the...
Yeah, we have some concerns about that. One being, why fund democracy deniers? It's like funding climate deniers. So that's number one. Number two, if the government is going to lead this campaign, as they've said they're going to, like they did on Ban Big Money, there's less of a need for a yes camp and a no camp. And we find it can be a very divisive strategy.
Well, what we need is information.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be nice if there were a 1-800 number to start with, people could ask questions. Is the government setting something like that up?
I'm quite sure they will, and Elections BC will certainly have a role. But I just want to really underline that our hope is the government will lead this so that we don't get into a really polarized campaign.
I hope so too. Yeah. We need less division, not more. But there are those who want to divide us. Last question, how can people get involved?
Great. Well, Fair Vote Canada has 12 chapters, 12,000 members. We're out there gathering signatures on our I Pledge to Vote Yes for PR in 2018. We need volunteers. We need people to write letters to the media. So if you're interested, just go to fairvote.ca or email me directly, tmdance@shaw.ca, and we'll get you involved. And there's many other groups also campaigning. So this is going to be a big movement, but we need people. And we're starting now. We're out there, holding information sessions.
Yeah, doing the work of democracy, informing people, which is great.
So we're optimistic.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank
Good
you.
luck to us all on that, I think, and thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.
Welcome back to Citizens Forum. Today I have as our guest Sharon Noble, who is the director of the Coalition to Stop Smart Meters. And Sharon has spent many hours, many days preparing a report. And I'd just like to frame what's happened firstly, just to let people know. In July 2015, Sharon lodged an official complaint with the BC Utilities Commission. Sharon charged that the new BC Hydro smart meters were not safe, and moreover that the meters had never been certified by any safety authority. Sharon provided examples of smart meter fires in BC, and these fires had put lives and property at risk. Sharon asked the BC Utilities Commission to conduct an investigation of the safety of smart meters, and if they were found to be unsafe, that a formal recall be made. Now, during this time, the BC Utilities Commission did not seek any expert opinion from electrical engineers, nor did they ask for any more information from Sharon. Rather, they put the onus on Sharon to provide to them that the BC Hydro report was flawed. Now, Sharon has responded with a comprehensive and thorough report. It showed that not only was Lynn Garris, a consultant for BC Hydro, his report was seriously flawed, but also that BC Hydro was negligent for using the Itron smart meters. On top of that, it appears that the BC Utilities Commission became a collaborator in this misdeed by turning a blind eye to all the damning evidence. So welcome to the show, Sharon.
Thank you, Walt.
Now, for starters, what led you to complain, to lodge your complaint about the safety of smart meters in the first place?
When the smart meters started to be installed in 2011, I started getting emails and phone calls from people who had had some problems. They'd had appliances burn up, they'd had damages done to their home, they had major issues, and all of it sounded very strange to me. So I started doing some investigation. Many of the issues, I believe, were caused by the fact that Corex was installing smart meters using people who were not qualified. They weren't electricians, they weren't linesmen. They were people taken off the street and given minimal training. They made mistakes. Also, the meters themselves were causing some problems. Down the road, meters were burning, they were failing. And so what I tried to do is to figure out how I can get some information. I knew nothing about the system. I would contact Hydro and get no information. So I started looking around, trying to find out how do things work. So I went to the laws. First of all, the BC Safety Standards Authority has laws. For instance, it says that smart meters are supposed to be, or all electrical devices are supposed to be certified safe by CSA, except those that are used by BC Hydro. BC Hydro can certify its own equipment by using one of their engineers, unless the device is unregulated. And smart meters are unregulated. So they don't have to be certified by anybody. Nobody.
Now, that's actually a law in British Columbia or in
Yes,
Canada.
it is, under the BC Safety Standards Act. Then I started looking at some of the other things, for instance, the Fire Safety Standards Act. I found that according to that law, any fire, regardless of the size, the amount of damage, so long as there was damage to property or to life, that a fire report has to be submitted to the Fire Commissioner's office. It's supposed to be completed by the fire department within 3 working days. And it's supposed to be submitted immediately after it's completed.
And was that happening?
No, but that's for another story.
Okay.
Then, also, if there's any sort of suspicion by the fire department that the fire was electrical in nature, they're supposed to be getting a fire electrical inspector to the fire immediately.
Right.
And then third, nothing is supposed to be removed from the scene of a fire. Nothing, until the fire inspector has done his job. Now, that's where I started.
Okay.
So then I said, okay, the first place I'll go is the Fire Commissioner's office. And I started asking for fire reports. Surprisingly, despite what the law says, the fire reports are not being submitted. A high percentage of them are not being submitted at all, and many are being submitted late, maybe months, if not years down the road.
Now, is there a penalty for not submitting a fire report?
No, none at all. In fact, when I asked the fire commissioner if there is a penalty or any sort of ramification, he said no. How do we know this? How do we know that there's not a report filed? We don't know if there's a fire until the report's filed.
Yeah.
So I would go to them and say, I want the report on the fire of XYZ. It happened a year ago or 8 months ago. They'd look, we don't have the report. I said, would you please request it for me? Yes. Sometimes they would eventually get it, sometimes they wouldn't.
Now, they'll be requesting a report from the BC Safety Authority?
No, they were requesting the fire report from the fire department.
Okay.
The one that was
That
supposed to have
attended
been
the fire.
completed within 3 days of the fire.
Okay.
Many of the reports would only be completed after I requested it. Some of them were completed 2 years after the fire, all depending upon their memory.
Yeah.
I wonder how accurate those are.
Yeah.
And then some of them had been completed, but never sent to the fire commissioners. So the most important thing about this fire commissioner report is that this is the basis for the fire commissioner's annual report. He uses these reports that he gets from the fire departments to report on the status of the fires in the province.
And what caused the fires and all that.
Exactly. He has basically 5 or 6 very general categories, such as smoking fires, fires that are caused by matches that are not due to smoking, internal combustion problems, heating equipment, and electrical equipment. Nothing specific to smart meters at all.
Mm-hmm.
Neither does he calculate or have any way of including any comments that are provided. So if a fire department sent in a report saying it was electrical, it started at the panel, and it's suspected that the smart meter was the problem, that wouldn't end up in the report at all. It's just ticked off as an electrical fire.
Oh, interesting.
And then this report formed the basis for BCUC's statement that there are no smart meter fires.
So that's the British Columbia Utilities Commission who relied on a report.
That was prepared by Len Garris.
Yeah.
Len Garris is the fire chief for Surrey, the former head of the BC Fire Chiefs Association. He was commissioned and paid by BC Hydro to write a report about the smart meters, whether they
Yeah.
were safe or not. He looked only at the Fire Commissioner's annual report and said because there were fewer electrical fires after the smart meters were installed than there were before the smart meters were installed, that means that there have been no smart meter fires.
Even though that in itself is quite a ridiculous assumption.
Now, logic, that's a major leap in logic. But it's also based on erroneous information.
Yeah.
It's based on the fact that perhaps as many as 30 or 40% of the fires have not been reported.
Yeah.
And no one knows it. No one knows it except me. The fire commissioner didn't know it. Len Garris didn't know it. And certainly BCUC doesn't know it. But yet that's what they're hanging their hat on.
And then the ones that are reported on, the data is so flawed for the cause of those ones that are reported.
In many instances, because it's late, or the form itself isn't very conducive for providing detailed information.
Yeah.
The information is in the comments, and those aren't included. Now, a second situation is that in many instances, there is no electrical inspector notified. Approximately 50% of the cases where I asked for an electrical inspection report from BC Safety Authority or the fire inspectors at the cities, they didn't have them. And so I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is that there were many instances where the BC Safety Authority said they couldn't make a report because the smart meter had been removed, which is against the law.
Yeah.
They said that they ruled out everything else. They knew it was an electrical fire. It started near the panel, perhaps on the outside of the house, but the smart meter had been removed and they couldn't inspect it.
Now, who would be in charge of enforcing the law that says you can't remove anything from a fire scene?
I would think that it should be the fire commissioner's department,
Yeah.
but it doesn't seem to be. Hydro denies that they've ever removed a meter from the scene of a fire before the inspector gives approval. But I've got many, many instances.
Yeah.
I've got evidence that this isn't true. And when the fire, when they can't determine the basis of the fire because the meter is gone, the fire inspector has to say, I don't know. And so, the fire report from the fire department says, undetermined, we can't say anything. So that goes into another batch that the fire commissioner doesn't count. Undetermined fire.
That's really quite remarkable situation.
Even further, Walt, when the fires are being reported by the fire commissioner, by the fire department, and the electrical inspector, the reports just get shoved in a drawer.
Yeah.
They don't talk to each other. So the BC Safety Authority might very well have some very valuable information,
Right.
but it goes nowhere.
So there's no central data bank of any sort.
No. No.
You
And there's
know.
no sharing of information.
So how do you see, for instance, how would the insurance providers, how do they view the situation?
That's an interesting story too. The insurance companies have never failed to pay a claim that I know of. They will come to the person and say, "Don't worry, we will pay your claim." Many people have come to me and said, "I know it was the smart meter. I saw it start at the smart meter. I heard the fire department talk about it being the smart meter." And I've asked the insurance commissioner or the insurance inspector to give me a copy of the report,
Yeah.
and they'll refuse. There has never been a victim that I've known who's been able to get a copy of the report. Also, according to the law, the insurance company is supposed to submit a copy of the fire report to the fire commissioner, but I haven't been able to get a copy of it. I was told I could get a copy with Freedom of Information. I've made dozens of requests, and I've never received a report.
What would be the reason why they wouldn't provide you with a
I
report?
can only guess, but I think it's a good guess. The insurance company has told victims that they do not own the report, that the insurance company owns the report. I don't understand why that is, because the victim is paying for the report through their premium.
One would assume so.
But the insurance companies also have told the victims that they're going to be using this report to reclaim the recovery of the claims from BC Hydro. Under every insurance premium, there's a subrogation clause, and that means that an insurance company can sue to recover claims that they've paid. They can sue from BC Hydro or from Itron
Yeah.
and recover the claims.
Would they have to make that known to the original person that had the fire, that they're actually going that route, or would anybody know that that's occurring?
I don't know whether they legally are bound to tell them, but they've, in a couple of situations, they have admitted that they're going to be suing. But that's a rare situation. Most people don't know to ask.
Right.
But the insurance companies are not coming forward. They're not advising the people as they would, for instance, remember with the Pinto Ford?
Yeah.
There was a problem. Insurance companies raised the issue.
Yeah.
Insurance companies should be raising this issue because there are fires that they're paying the claims for.
And that would be a line of defense for consumers if their insurance providers are saying, well, we don't like this product and we're going to cost you more, your premiums are going to cost more because you have this. You would start a process where
Yes.
people would be alarmed by that.
You'd think. But the insurance company is subrogating, getting recovery, but yet they're still increasing the premiums for the victims. So for the insurance company, it appears to be a win-win situation. I have been unable to document this. I've gone to the insurance commissioners. I've gone to the financial institutions,
Yeah.
regulatory body. I can't get any information on this. So it's just a guess on my part, but it makes sense.
It does make sense. Now, the report itself is a very substantial document, and the evidence that that you've submitted is a very large binder here sitting on the desk. It's a huge amount of work. It's very impressive that you've taken this much time and effort as a citizen to point out some very, very serious situations here that we have. You've pointed out several deficiencies in the system already, where the safety and the health and safety of the public is put at risk because of this lack of information. Now, did you want to talk a little bit about the smart meters themselves?
Yes.
Okay, what was said about these smart meters when you start to look into them?
Well, the smart meters themselves have many design flaws. First and foremost, they're made of plastic, combustible plastic. The old analogs that they're replacing were made of glass and metal.
Yeah.
And as engineers have told me, they could not burn. And I have asked the hydro, I've asked the BC Utilities Commission, I've asked the fire commissioner. If you can tell me one time when there's been an analog fire, I would like to know. BCUC's definition of whether the smart meters are safe or more dangerous than a smart analog is if they have caused more fires than an analog. I've never been able to find an analog fire.
Right.
So by BCUC's own definition, smart meters are not safe.
Yeah.
In addition, I've spoken with many electrical engineers who've taken the smart meters apart, many who've studied them in depth, and they found many design flaws
Yeah.
that, in their opinion, make them to be fire hazards. One, beyond the fact that they're combustible,
Yeah.
is the fact that they have no surge protectors. The analogs would stop, they had fuses that were associated with them, and
Yeah.
the surge would not occur. Right now, there are no surge protectors. And for instance, an example was in Summerland, a couple of years ago during the winter, there was a storm, and a fire or a tree went on top of the wires, the power lines, and dozens of smart meters exploded off homes, causing fires. This has happened across North America dozens of times. Never with an analog meter, but with the smart meters,
Yeah.
yes. Another design flaw is that there's a remote disconnect switch, allowing hydro to either turn the power on or off at the meter. It arcs, and this arcing can cause fires.
Right.
Also, there's a lithium battery that runs the smart meter to keep track of the data if there's a power outage. This lithium battery will explode if it overheats or if it gets wet.
That's something like the problem they had with lithium batteries on airplanes. Remember, they were.
Yes, they're not allowed on airplanes
Yeah.
anymore, but yet they're allowed on the side of our homes.
Yeah.
I have had so many electrical engineers provide information, and I've included a couple of them in my report,
Yeah.
and yet they're being ignored. This information is being ignored. And I hold BCUC guilty of complicity.
Yeah.
Because even though I provided this information, I provided it 2 years ago,
Yeah.
I provided it again last year, and I provided it again in this report. And they have just ignored it.
So, the Lynn Garris report, that it's quite obvious that the BC Utilities Commission relied solely on that report. And that report was paid for and commissioned by BC Hydro, the very people that.
No conflicts of interest there.
Yeah, this is a question. I mean, do you think that would, in itself, would render that report, almost useless to use because of the conflicts that are there?
You would think so. The BC Utilities Commission relied on only one source, and Lynn Garris relied only on one source. And that one source is faulty. It's incomplete. It's
Yeah.
the Fire Commissioner's annual report. But in everything they've said, when I told BCUC that the Fire Commissioner is not getting all the fire reports,
Yeah.
they said, I don't believe you. The law says fire reports have to be completed. When I said that the electrical inspection's not occurring, they said, I don't believe you. The law requires it.
Yeah.
When I said meters are being removed from the scene of fires, they said, that's against the law. It can't be happening.
Yeah.
They don't want to believe the evidence. I have 600 pages of evidence here, and I dare them to ignore it.
Well, this is what's so remarkable. I mean, the overall scenario here is that you've dissected this a situation here that we're having with our inability to actually effectively analyze whether a product is safe or not. And every agency and every government body are more or less deficient in one way or another. But there's no overall authority that's going to step up and say, okay, you guys, this has to stop. We're going to do something different. Is that the way it is to you?
Yes, exactly the way it is. And what's really concerning, I mean, smart meters for sure are a problem. The Fire Commissioner doesn't know, BC Safety Authority doesn't know, the politicians are ignoring. All of this stuff is happening. There's no central authority.
Yeah.
You have to ask, what other dangerous practices are going on?
Yeah.
other things could be happening, and there's no central authority. There are no penalties for breaking these laws.
Ultimately, what ministry in the provincial government, I assume it'd be the provincial government, would have the jurisdiction to oversee all these problems? Is it one single ministry or would it be several?
The energy minister, of course, is in charge of BC Hydro.
Yeah.
So she ultimately, Minister Mungle, is ultimately responsible for the smart meter program.
Yeah.
She inherited it. It's a mess. It needs to be investigated, but it's hers now.
Yeah.
The fire commissioner reports to the infrastructure and transmission and transportation minister, Trevina.
Yeah.
And she is ultimately responsible for the mess at the fire commissioner's office. I don't know who the BC Safety Authority is responsible to. The fire departments ultimately report, I believe, to the fire commissioner. So it would be Trevina's responsibility to make sure that the fire department is providing the reports,
Yeah.
that the fire department is involving the inspector,
Yeah.
that they are reporting and communicating with each other. I think that is the ultimate authority for the reporting. But there is no mechanism at this point to hold anybody responsible.
So, okay, where do we go from here? I mean, what can you do now? Who do you approach? What's the next step?
I wish I knew, Walt. On September 2nd, I hand-delivered this report, all 700 pages, to John Horgan's constituency office. And I mailed these binders to the BC Utilities Commission, to David Morton, who's the CEO and chair of the BCUC. I mailed it to Energy Minister Mungle. I mailed it to Minister Trevina. And who else? Oh, and to Sonia Furstenau of the Green Party.
Yeah.
So far, I've heard from nobody.
Yeah.
Not one response in more than 2 months.
It's been 2 months since you've
In
done
2
that.
months. I also emailed every single solitary MLA,
Yeah.
and I asked them, please do your due diligence.
Yeah.
BC Hydro isn't. BC Hydro has never done its due diligence.
No.
It has allowed these dangerous things to be put on our homes, lives and property being put at risk.
Yeah.
Somebody must care. What I'm asking for is an independent panel, the same type that is looking at Site C.
Okay.
We have to remember, Site C and the Smart Meter program were both treated under the Clean Energy Act the same way. No oversight was allowed.
Okay.
Money is being spent, a lot of money. That's for another program,
Yeah.
but costs are never ending on this program.
Yeah.
The only thing green is the money going into the corporate pocket, and no one's doing anything about it. And
Yeah.
we're getting sick, our lives and property being put at risk. And we need to have an independent panel look at all aspects of this program.
Yeah.
If I am found to be correct that these meters are fire hazards, they should be recalled. Itron has sold hydro and the BC public a defective product.
Now, who would conduct a review of that sort? Would that be the provincial government? Would it be, who would order up that?
It would be the BC government, I think, would order it. And I think on that panel should be some independent forensic experts.
Yeah.
They shouldn't just hand it off to BC Hydro
Yeah.
or anyone like that. They need to bring in forensic engineers who could look at
Yeah.
this from from the fire safety point of view. They
Yeah.
need forensic accountants to look at the accounting and the expenses. They need to look at cybersecurity experts to look at the hacking issue.
Yeah.
There are many issues, but from a fire perspective, they need a panel of experts who have absolutely no tie to BC Hydro, because you're not going to get the truth.
So it really would have to be the premier that would have to
I
decide
think so.
to make a decision of that magnitude.
Isn't he the one who ordered a Site C review?
It's correct. And he was the one that decided to send the Site C question to the BC Utilities Commission.
Yes.
And ask for a serious review.
I don't think the BC Utilities Commission is the right panel for reviewing it. They've shown themselves to be incapable of doing it.
Yeah.
They have biases. They have some conflicts of interest apparently that I'm not aware of, because every time I've complained to them now for 4 years,
Yeah.
and I keep getting the same answer from them. So I would say I would like to see an independent panel scratched from day one.
Yeah. So we should mention that you were down at the BC NDP annual convention just last weekend, and
Yes.
you're outside the doors. Why were you outside the doors? Why wouldn't they allow you inside the convention?
We asked to have a table and they refused to grant us one. Even though I hear that there were empty ones available, they wouldn't let us have one. So a bunch of us were outside handing out
Yeah.
flyers, and I had a poster that I was holding showing a melted smart meter and a burned house, a house in Langford. And I
Yeah.
had, the reaction was amazing,
So the general membership of the NDP, as they walked past you and responded,
very
well,
positively.
so it was very positive.
A lot of people still have their own analogs.
Yeah.
Many people are upset that the NDP is not getting involved in this, that they've allowed this to
Yeah.
happen the way they did. Several told me they should have put up a fight day one, and they
Yeah.
didn't. Many others are furious at the fact that it's costing so much. Very knowledgeable people. Many of them are also concerned about the radiation issue,
The health effects.
the health effects.
And that's a topic for another day too. Setting aside all the security issues and
The fire
all the
issue.
chances of this information being hacked and the meters being hacked, and then you have this huge issue around the health issues of the radiation.
I had two tell me that they had been made sick by smart meters.
Yeah, and believe me, I've heard many people who have been made
Yes.
ill by being too close to smart meters. So we're going to wrap it up for today, Sharon. I there's so much to talk about here, and I really hope that we can have you back in a future date. I know you must be very tired. This is a huge amount of work.
But people deserve to have this information, Walt.
Yeah.
They're not getting it any other way, and I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that you're doing it.
So it's a pleasure, believe me. I'm so impressed by your work, and I can't say thank you enough. I think it's a document that's going to live on. It's full of truth, and the fact that the government to this point has been able to ignore it is just a travesty for democracy and for what's fair and just in our society. And the fact that you've soldiered on and created this document is so impressive to me. And I think we all should, as citizens, take heart that you can actually do something here to show how the system is not working.
People should go online and read it.
Yeah.
This report is available on our website.
Yeah.
And the report itself is only 38 pages long.
Yeah.
It's simple reading, and I think they'd find it very interesting.
Well, it's very, very compelling. And after we're done, we're going to show a clip of Vicky Lightfoot, who was at that convention. She's an NDP delegate from Penticton, and to show how she was treated when she tried to have her resolution heard.
All we wanted was, we would like consideration of the independent review of it. That's all we're
and
asking.
if the government cannot act on such compelling evidence, I mean, it goes to show just how broken our system is. If the old adage is that no matter who you vote for, the government always gets in, it seems to be a bit of a joke. But if they cannot act on this and will not take this information seriously, then it really does go right to the core of what our problems are with our democracy in
Well,
Canada.
I'm very disappointed I haven't even received an acknowledgement. My theory is that they don't want to acknowledge this report, because if they do, they might have to do something.
Yeah, it's almost like too big an issue. They're feeling that they're going to step on a lot of big toes.
There's a
when they
lot of
start.
vested interest
A lot
here.
of interest here. And we'll be talking more about that maybe in the future. So thank you very much, Sharon, for coming in today. So that completes our segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back, and we're going to have a little chat, Jack and I, about the events of the day. And I think, firstly, Jack, what was your impression of the evidence that Sharon had provided for us today?
You sort of had to laugh a few times, but the overriding thing to me is that the media also refuses to report on it. So we can see this, I call it a conspiracy, the government, the media, and above them the corporations who for whatever reason are doing all this to us. And it just shows how how totally gone our democracy
And
is.
I have with me today Vicky Lightfoot. Vicky has a resolution that's going to be put to the floor in regards to the use of smart meters. So, welcome, Vicky. And would you give us an outline of what your resolution's about?
Well, my resolution is asking the BC NDP government to take the smart meter program to the Utility Commission so that it can be reviewed for the cost to consumers and the viability of the program and how much it's really costing consumers.
Okay, so how have you been received here at the convention?
We've been received wonderfully. I wasn't allowed to have a table here. I was told there wasn't enough room, but I see lots of space. So this morning a bunch of us stood outside in front and we let the delegates know about our message that way. Every delegate that we met was in favor of our resolution, and we were very well received. Lots of people want to see this go to the Utility Commission. It was over $1 billion, never reviewed by the Utility Commission, and it needs to be.
Now, previously the Utility Commission actually did have a ruling on smart meters.
That's right. The Utility Commission received application for this, I think, in 2008, and they were turned down. They said the Utility Commission at the time said it wasn't in the best interest of consumers to do this program. It was too expensive and would continue to be very expensive. So Gordon Campbell brought in the Clean Energy Act and bypassed the Utility Commission, just like he did with the Site C dam as well. And so over $1 billion, we don't know how much more than $1 billion have been spent on this program with no oversight by the People's Utility Commission.
Now, as per costs for installing the smart meters for British Columbia, how does that compare to other jurisdictions?
We paid twice as much as any other jurisdictions to install the meter. I'd like to know why we pay twice as much, who's profiting from that, where the profits are going to. I suspect that it's individual private contractors benefiting it, former Liberal insiders who set up companies in Richmond, got the contract to install these, and I think that that needs to be looked at as well.
The resolution that she has submitted is now looks like it's not going to be able to be discussed. So could you ask, I got to ask you, Vicky, what has occurred here?
Well, obviously not just our resolution, but a number of resolutions, somewhat contentious, were submitted to a panel, and the panel put things in order according to their priorities. Our resolution was not considered a priority, and it's number 27 out of 28 within an hour. It's not going to get heard.
Do you think that that's undemocratic?
I absolutely believe it's undemocratic, and motions were just made on the floor for people to ask for them to be bumped up on the agenda, and there was a big argument back and forth, and basically we lost. The committee, unbeknownst to us, what they discuss or how, determines the order of resolutions, knowing full well that those in the top 10 are going to get heard, and those in the top 20 might get heard, and those after number 20 will definitely not get heard. So our resolution asking the BC NDP government to send the smart meter debacle to the Utility Commission, like it should have been, over $1 billion spent of our money, it should have been the oversight of our utility company.
One would think that since they sent the Site C dam to the BC Utilities Commission, that they would be more prone to also send this issue to the Commission.
Absolutely, and it's interesting, in opposition, Adrian Dix said that, you can quote him, he said that this should be have oversight and accountability, and it needs to be looked at. So in opposition they understood, but in government it's a whole different story. Not too sure why. That's something you'll have to ask Adrian Dix about, or John Horgan, or Michelle Mangal, the new Minister for Energy.
It seems like it's almost like Tom Sampson had talking to in the Indigenous Voice segment I saw the other day. He talked about the shadow government, and it's a phrase that you could think about, because it seems like that there's this other force happening on all these other events, that somehow we cannot find justice and fairness, that with all these institutions and all these bureaucracies, there's this other force acting on it that we can't affect.
We've lost control of our own government, and they work against us on behalf of a small elite who run the country. And we've
Yeah.
got to take control of our governments back. But boy, we are nowhere close to doing that. And here we're going to show a short video clip of the NDP convention as an example of it, I guess.
Yeah, and we're going to run that, just show Vicky Lightfoot's struggle with her own party, with the NDP, and how she was treated when she was trying to put a resolution forward. So also, I brought in a clip here about that came from the Times columnist. It was Saturday, October 28th, and the title is a strong case for free flu shots.
Right. So this was a major editorial.
Major editorial on the TC for that day. I took just a very few minutes out of my time to just check a couple of things, and then they were saying that about 40% of Canadians get the flu shot, and they would like to see that up to about 80% to really make this flu shot effective, even though there's no real good scientific evidence to show that it is effective. But what I did is I just simply went online and went to a website that talked about world life expectancy rates in different countries. And the three countries that the editorial had mentioned was Spain, the Netherlands, and Ireland. And what was very interesting about was that in the three countries that were getting the 80% mark for flu shots, in Spain, there was no change in mortality rates as a result of flu. So there was no evidence that showed that the flu shots were effective. Now, in Ireland and the Netherlands, that were also reaching around this 80% mark, twice as many people were dying from the flu than in Canada, when we were only getting half the shots here. So I think what the problem is that there's a couple of problems. Firstly, I don't think they've done any research to back up their article. But secondly, it does show that the flu shot is actually detrimental to good health. So I think Canadians should know that, that they should be asking questions about this whole issue around flu shots.
To me, the vaccine issue is as I saw evidence many years ago when a friend was in medical school in his textbook. It showed very clearly that vaccines had no impact on all the major diseases. It was a series of graphs and charts that showed that when the numbers of all these diseases were going down over time, and when the flu shot or when the various vaccines were introduced, all of them, nothing changed in the line. It continued going down at the same rate. So I believe it's more about money, corporate profit, than it has to do with our health. And the media is a big part of. All I want, if I'm wrong, I've got no problem with that. Show me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But don't tell us over and over and over and over again without ever giving the hard evidence and the numbers that it's safe and effective. Because
there is hard evidence that the Cochrane report that was done a few years ago showed that there was absolutely no indication that flu vaccines were effective. So I see you brought in something in relation to health with hospital beds. And I think you should just go over this so people know what's been happening to our hospitals.
There's now a case in the BC Supreme Court that's saying our health system is so bad that it should be ruled unconstitutional, and a fully private U.S.-style system of some kind should be allowed in if they want, because our system is so bad. And we all know the worst part is the overcrowding in hospitals and the fact that people can't get treatment in the hospitals and the emergency room chaos. So here's the numbers. In 1990, we had 180,000 hospital beds in Canada. I just read in the Globe and Mail today that we have 85,000. We went from 180,000 beds to 85,000 beds.
And over what period?
From 1990 until today. And the story in the Globe and Mail is called "More Beds Won't Solve Hospital Overcrowding." I mean, that's how crazy the story is.
Yeah.
They've done this to us deliberately so the system could not work. They closed all the beds, and now they're in court to privatize the system, and nobody even tells us about it.
Yeah.
That's how well our government, the NDP, is now involved in this case. You can't get a word, just like Sharon. You can't get a word out of them. They won't comment on this most important case.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those hospital beds were closed in British Columbia during one NDP regime back in the 90s.
They did their job.
So, and also, I mean, if you look at the population has increased quite dramatically also.
By millions.
So, I mean, we might have maybe a third of the hospital beds per capita now that we had 27 years ago.
Yeah.
And
one of the lowest in the developed world when you
Yeah.
look at the number, lowest beds per person. And the other part of the system that doesn't work is all the Western medical treatments, all the pharmaceuticals, all the drugs, all the CAT scans, they don't work. So
Yeah.
people never get better. How
Yeah.
bizarre is that? But somebody's making a lot of money.
well, this is it. I mean, you're talking about paying taxes, and by the way, the cost of healthcare is skyrocketing still.
Why not?
So how does that work? They're giving less care, but it's costing us more money. Well, where is that money going, Jack? What do you think? You know?
Yeah, and I mean, it comes down to the same old thing. We've lost control of our governments. We have to get it back. PR, which is what we started the show with, is something in that direction. And they won't let us have that either. Just watch.
Well, let's find out. I mean,
We got to fight for it.
that's going to be a battle, and we have to really, all the citizens of British Columbia, we have to get together on this one, because I'm afraid, as you are too, that some way or other they're going to weasel out of it, and we're going to be stuck with some kind of a system that won't be fair further on. And I think the only way to ensure that is we got to get involved, and we got to make darn sure that this referendum is fair, and then the results of the referendum are implemented.
And don't trust or believe the corporate media, because they represent interests that do not want proportional representation because it is more democratic. I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, this system is so badly broken. So this is how I look at it, that it's very hard to do anything worse than this. So any change whatsoever, I think, will be for the better. And we see where proportional representation does work in other countries. As a matter of fact, Canada is one of the last countries in the world that don't have some form of proportional representation. So we're not reinventing anything here. We're just simply trying to make a fairer system. So on that note, folks, we're going to wrap up the show this week, and we'll see you next week.